Hello and welcome, everybody. It's going to be a fascinating interview this evening because Joe is on the exact same page as many of us when it comes to campaigning for the underdogs in the justice system. He's covered some huge cases, represented the people, and come through fighting. His own backstory includes the heartbreaking story of how his brother was savaged by the parasites in the legal system, and we're going to get into that as well, so you can see why he's on the mission. One of the biggest names he's worked on the team for is Andrew Tate. We're going to be talking about that as well, and some of the other big cases. But first off, huge thank you for coming on, Joe. And what was it that set you on this mission?
Well, thank you for having me on, Sean. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate and admire all the work that you do. So going back to about 2005, what set me on the mission was the wrongful conviction of my own brother. He was essentially accused of a crime that he absolutely did not commit. I come from a traditional sort of Catholic family. I'm Puerto Rican and Irish. It's a very New York, Brooklyn mix. And, my mom and dad were people of middle class, lower middle class means, but wanted to give back. So we were foster parents, and we had a bunch of foster kids come through our house, all different backgrounds, all different faiths, all different everything, all boys. And we adopted Anthony, and he was born addicted to heroin, alcohol, a bunch of other things, real tough upbringing. Right before we got him, he comes from a family of 12, 8 brothers and 4 sisters, and his best friend and his little brother at the time, they were about a year apart. They were supposed to get adopted together, and for whatever reason, the family took his brother and they booted him into the street and back into the agency. So we got him 2 weeks after that happened, and just a real rough life. We took him in, we loved him as our own. We gave him our name. He's my brother, but he's also paranoid schizophrenic. He had a bunch of other mental diagnoses along the way. And when he was accused of a crime that he did not commit, he was threatened with 125 years of incarceration with a defense attorney who was basically in cahoots with the judge and the prosecutor. They did not give him justice. They did not care about the fact that he had some type of serious mental defect. And my brother, thinking that he was doing the smart thing outside of the presence of meaningful counsel, signed a 15-year plea deal, and he did 10 years on that deal. When that happened, I was devastated. But when I saw my mom and dad, the devastation was just like 10x. These are good people who love God, who love country, who just love humanity, shirt off your back type of people. And to watch them go through this, I had to do something. And to be quite honest with you, I probably quit every job I had before then. I was big into the nightlife scene in New York City and Miami in the late 90s, early 2000s. I had a religious experience of my own, but that was my life. I was in the mixed martial arts scene for a while as well, but I really had no purpose. I really had nothing, that was my calling. And when that happened, I discovered what my purpose was very quickly. And I told my mom and dad and my brother, I said, hey, look, I can go become, street guy from Brooklyn here. I can go become a lawyer probably in half the time of his sentence. It takes about 7-8 years in the States to become an attorney and get admitted. And I'll see if I can get him out. It took me 10 years to become an attorney. I didn't factor in bar exams and admissions and applications and money. And by the time I had gotten to a place where I was admitted to the bar and I could meaningfully help my brother, he got out like the same month I got admitted. And while I wasn't able to help him, I committed myself to fighting for people whom the justice system unfairly targeted for nefarious purposes, unjust purposes, political purposes, racial purposes, whatever it is, you name it. Whoever's the underdog, whoever the system at large is going after, I'm going to defend. And I've been doing that ever since.
So was it a state case with your brother or a federal case, and was he exonerated?
State case, was not exonerated. And he was not exonerated because we did not pursue the exoneration, even though I would very much like to. The reason why we did not pursue it is because when my brother was in jail, because he had has a mental several mental issues, the jail didn't properly know how to care for him. So their solution was at one point to put him in the box, solitary confinement, for almost 5 years straight. And what was ever left of my brother, it broke. He came out. He wasn't the same man. He was not able to adapt back into life, back in the world. My brother's in a home now, so I wasn't able to help him. And but I keep that fire. I keep that fire in my belly every day for for the people who I fight for now. It's very unfair what happened to my brother, but I'm also very much aware that there's a lot of unfairness out there in the world that happens to people every day. So I do my best to contribute and to fight in some small yet meaningful way to stick up for anybody who comes across my path where it makes sense to me, business wise and legally, to be able to help them, because I'm an all or nothing guy. When I represent somebody, I am in it to the end. Win, lose, or draw, ride or die, I'm there until the wheels come off.
Yeah, so what happened to your brother? That is state-sanctioned torture as far as I'm concerned. And the sad thing is, the perpetrators are never held accountable, are they? They have immunity, don't they?
Qualified immunity is a big problem. Yes, it's basically like we're agents of the state as long as we are acting with some reasonable degree of good faith. We are basically untouchable. If he were to be exonerated, we would sue and we would win, and he'd probably clean up, get a lot of money. That's how they make people whole again. But in terms of giving somebody back that life, that part of their spirit, that part of their brain, the years, you can't put a price on that. And because of the qualified immunity, especially in the States, they do this rampantly.
So you were working diligently for 10 years then, studying. Did you have to do, jobs to sustain yourself through this period?
Yes. Yeah. I worked my butt off every time I could. And then when I got into law school, you have to, it's like indentured servitude. You have to work for free, essentially to gain the relevant experience that you need. And then you moonlight on the side and do whatever you can do to survive in order to get through. But I got through and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the law. I learned a lot about people. Law school, I hated every second of it because I was around this, this class of people who didn't like me and I didn't like them. And we came from different worlds, was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I clawed to the top. I clawed to the top of the school. I clawed to the top of the practice. And I'm here despite every single last one of them.
So did those people have an eye on becoming prosecutors then?
Most of those people I went to school with had an eye on becoming corporate attorneys.
Big money.
Big money attorneys, corporate attorneys. But there was a Cardozo Law in New York City has a program. It's a criminal defense clinic. It's ran by a professor named Jonathan Oberman. He's phenomenal. He was my mentor in school. He doesn't really talk to me anymore because of my politics, but that's neither here nor there. But they have the defense program there, and they also have the Innocence Project. And the Innocence Project is where if you hear, if a guy's in jail for 20, 30 years and gets out through DNA, you can go, you can help those people. So I worked with both of them. I was at the Innocence Project for a year, and then I was at Oberman's clinic for a year, the defense clinic, and then I went straight out. So I kind of stayed with that group of people. But my interactions with the rest of them, in everyday life and in the rest of my classes, none of those people cared about you or me, that's for sure, or about any of the people I represent.
Yeah, I've interviewed a few people who've been helped by the Innocence Project, and they do fantastic work. So let's get this straight then. So you're studying for 10 years. Then you have to go and work for free as an apprenticeship in a law firm. Is that what happens?
Yeah. So I worked as an apprentice for the Legal Aid Society and a few other organizations, but basically public service, public defender organizations where you go in You get relevant experience as an investigator, as a junior attorney, as an apprentice, so to speak. And then you make your connections there. You move and shake your network. People see that you're good, and then they make you an offer after school. So straight out of school, I went into the Legal Aid Society in New York City, in Manhattan. I was a public defender for the first 5 years of my career. And then I switched, I started my own firm when I really felt that the public defender organization that I was working for had betrayed its mission statement and would only really meaningfully advocate for people, no matter who they were, so long as they were on one side of the political aisle. I saw that as reprehensible, and I said, well, if you won't represent these people, I will, and I'll go out there and I'll do a hell of a job doing it. And that's how I began my law firm.
Do you remember your first case as a public defender?
You know what? I'd like to sit here and tell you that I do, but I was handed on day one about 30 cases at one time. So I had 100 cases or so by the end of my first month. I remember my first trial. I remember my last trial as a public defender for sure. I remember all my trials. I remember many of my clients. Some of them are still friends with me today. Some of them still say, hey, I remember when you helped me and look at my life now. And, you believed in me back then, so on and so forth. But thousands of cases over the course of that time. And caseloads are off the charts when you're a public defender, especially in New York City.
So what was the first case you took to trial?
It was a drinking and driving case. It was a guy who was accused of being behind the wheel after having consumed too much alcohol. He actually didn't legally consume anything past the limit. The guy had one beer, and the NYPD had failed to properly set up an accident scene, and my guy crashed into the sort of a part of the scene where a squad car was parked, but they did not set it up the right way. And any person in a rainstorm would have crashed at that time. So what I did was I whipped out their rule book and I cross-examined them on their procedure, and they didn't follow their procedure. And the jury, it was a 5-day trial, and the jury acquitted him in 15 minutes. The jury just saw that. They said, hey, listen, the guy had one beer. He got up there and he told the truth. You guys didn't secure the scene of the crime. I know exactly where that place and location is. It's tricky on a good day. It's no surprise that this happened, and we're not going to, make this guy go down because you messed things up.
What is your most memorable trial case from the public defender years?
Probably my last trial, which was a drug case where a gentleman had been living in a homeless shelter, and he had 20 glass scenes of heroin strapped to his leg, like taped to his leg. And there was a confusion with my co-counsel, who does not come from the street like I do. And I knew the difference between bundles and stacks, and she thought it was 200. It was really 20, and the prosecutor as well. And we had this very interesting conversation where I was like, look, this guy has about 30 or 40 misdemeanor convictions, 10 felonies. Guy's got a lifelong problems, but we can beat the felonies in this case because what he has here on him is his life savings of drugs strapped to his legs, because he's a user, and he has $1 bill, one credit card that doesn't belong to him, and a razor blade. And she wanted to move to suppress those items in court. And I said, we can't suppress those items. Those items are critical for the judge and the jury to see them, because they're going to understand that this is a personal use case, that he's not selling. So we went back and forth. And she wound up going with my theory, and we wound up winning and getting beating the top charges, which was, trafficking of some kind, which he would have gotten 10 years in jail for. And he had already had time served on the misdemeanors. He had already done like 3 months, and the guy walked free. And because the guy was a drug addict, he's got money from public assistance. He strapped the money to his leg. He goes and uses it. It's an unfortunate situation, but the guy's not a heroin dealer. So, and he got caught jumping the turnstile. most heroin dealers don't jump the turnstile. They have a little sense about them. So, I was able to use some street smarts and some relationship with the judge. And I was able to say to an attorney that was senior to me, hey, maybe you should do this my way. And I'm glad that she listened to me. And I realized at that point in time, too, that I had reached my ceiling. Like, I was working with some of the best attorneys. And, I was maybe arguably better than them. And I wanted to go out into the world and test my mettle. And, I've been getting good results ever since.
So as a public defender, do you have to take all the cases that they assign to you? Or if something goes against what you believe, for example, adults who are attracted to kids, could you refuse to take that kind of a case?
So the answer is you are supposed to take every case that they give you. But if you have a case that is triggering to you or morally objectionable to you or factually so difficult for you where you cannot objectively and in good conscience represent that person the way that the Constitution mandates, then you should step off of the case. And I, in fact, did have a case where I needed to step off of because it had nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It had to do with the fact it actually involved a child. And I couldn't do it. I wanted to murder the guy, and I told my superior, I said, I want to murder this guy. I can't represent him. And they transferred the case to someone else.
Completely understandable, and I commend you for that. So how easy or difficult was it to transition from being a public defender to having your own practice?
It was pretty easy, growing up in New York City, in and around the area here, I have a lot of friends. I mean, the world I come from, basically everybody who I grew up with, with the exception of a very small handful of people, they're all dead or in jail, right? So the guys who were gangsters and who I knew who grew up and did different things, they were all like, oh, when are you going to go federal? When are you going to go private? We got cases for you. We got money for you, and it's sure as shit. 2 weeks out, I had my first federal case, and they just started coming. And it was like, oh, I always knew you were going to make it. And those guys helped propel me, and they gave me what I needed in my first couple of years there to take off. And I got good results for them too. And being a lawyer, well, most of what they teach you in law school is irrelevant. It's like they teach you how to think like a lawyer, to look at both sides of an issue. Okay, fine. Other than that, you need to know the law. And then past that, it's people skills. So most of the skills that I learned growing up in my home, how to problem solve, how to issue spot, how to deal with people from different cultures and different backgrounds, how to talk to people, and how to go into a room. My father said, this is how you go into a room and conduct yourself as a man. My mother said, this is how you conduct yourself as a man. And I took those skills into life and I bring them into my practice. And it turns out people like them when you're raised the right way and you have a personality. So, it just transitioned well for me.
So what was the case for your first trial in private practice?
Oh, man. So the case for my first trial in private practice was an assault case. It was a man and a woman were having an argument, and the man wound up taking the woman's cell phone and throwing it, and it went through hit a storefront window. So it was fairly complex because I had to have the girlfriend on the stand to tell the jury that she had agitated her boyfriend to the point where he threw the phone. And then I had to get him to on the stand to talk about how when he threw the phone, he had no intent to hurt anybody. He was just blowing off steam, and it was more negligence than it was criminal. Got him off too. We beat the top charges in that case. He did get a menacing and I believe a vandalism charge, but they were tickets. So, it's not what it could have been, but that was my first private practice, and I still know them too. They're pretty funny.
So when you're starting out in private then, what was your most challenging early case?
Most challenging early case is it's like actually a case I'm still dealing with. Well, January 6th cases aside, because that's a whole body of litigation that it's like the law doesn't apply there. But so I have a guy that was dealing cocaine, and he was also using it. And they found the cops came and they found cocaine in his house pursuant to a search warrant. They had a search warrant to search the house and the first floor of the house and the outside. But after they found it, they went downstairs into the basement, opened up a secret compartment. They pulled a brick out of there, right? And the warrant did not give them permission to go down there and do it. So we challenged the warrant, and we didn't get the result that we should have. We should have been able to suppress that, but it didn't happen. And my guy wound up having to take a plea because he was looking at like a long time in jail, and we negotiated it down to the very bottom dollar amount. But just because of it bothers me to this day because we were right on the law and we got the wrong decision. And it's a case that's actually about I don't know 7 years old at this point. I mean, normally a case like that would have been wrapped up in 6 months. But we've been scrappy about it, trying to really get him the minimum amount of time. And we're actually wrapping that up here in the next few months.
So do those fruit from the forbidden tree situations arise a lot?
Oh, they sure do. They sure do. There's a lot of forbidden fruit out there in court that should not be there. But it sure is.
What was your first high-profile case then?
So my first high-profile case was a case that there's a case that I came on after the conviction. I came on to help examine the FBI's planting of evidence in a hard drive. This was for a guy named Keith Raniere. He was accused and convicted of being the NXIVM sex cult leader. They made an HBO documentary and a Starz documentary about it. And in order to get him, the FBI did in fact plant evidence against him. And instead of trying and winning on the facts, they knew that they were scant on the facts, and they doctored evidence in order to get him to get a conviction. And now he's got 120 years in jail. I came on for that limited purpose and then jumped off. His case was subsequently appealed. The appeal failed, and it's unfortunate because morality aside, doesn't matter what you've been accused of. Morality aside, the government's got to beat you by the rules. If the government doesn't abide by the rules, why the hell should any of us, right? So they did not beat him by the rules, but because the system hated him so much because of the facts and the accusations under which he was accused, it turned a blind eye to government misconduct, which, as you know, is a very slippery slope.
So that 3 questions arise. What did they plant? How did they plant it? And how do you detect that they've planted it?
It's a great question. So detection it just came from the client saying, hey, I never had that on my computer. They planted evidence on a hard drive in his computer and then accused and said, hey, these pictures belong to him. And they were pictures of an underage girl. And he's like, there's no way, no how. This is factually impossible. There was a broken chain of custody, and we had to get the hard drive, the image of the hard drive, turn it over to experts. We had a former FBI employee, career employee, subsequently retired 20 years in the FBI, expert in the field, issue a report saying this was doctored. They didn't care, right? And that kind of thing is what we're seeing in the American justice system now. It's what we're seeing in my January 6 cases, right? A lot of these guys who went to the Capitol, politics aside, you can love them, you can hate them. If somebody went down to the Capitol and kicked over a sign and took a walk, and even say they peed on a wall somewhere or smoked a cigarette or broke a window, you give them the appropriate response. But you have people that are getting 20, 30, 15, 18, 19 years for crimes that people on the other side of the political aisle are committing all over the place in America, and they're being sent home the same day. And it's the dismantling of the American justice system, which I believe to be the greatest justice system in the world up until recently, for political purposes. It's the politicization. It's politics in the justice system. It's the arresting of your political opponents and their supporters for political reasons, to quench dissidents in the public square, in order to align the public with one line of thinking. You think and you walk and you talk and you dress the way we want you to. Otherwise, we're going to lock you up and then we're going to throw away the key, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah, I've written books about the Bush-Clinton crime families. I think one of them's on my shoulder. That side is it. And the weaponization of the justice system and the intelligence agencies as well. So do you think that Trump then went against that trend?
Oh, without a doubt. There's no question about it. Most people who run for political office, lots of people who run for political office are poor, and they want to come up, they want power, they want influence, and they get sucked into those sort of like what we call the swamp. Other people come from these sort of, blue blood families, these very waspy families, and, in America, and they've sort of sat in positions of power for a long time. And it's just a rolling over of power to, from generation to generation. And there are a group of people who are poor who want to join that group, and they all get in together and they do that, right? Trump, independently wealthy, from New York, does not give a shit, doesn't need anything from anyone. He just said, you know what? I love my country. I'm going to say a bunch of things that you don't agree with, but guess what? This is America. I get to do that. And if you don't like me, don't vote for me. And if you do like what I'm saying, then vote for me and let's change things. And that's what he ran on. That's why people identified with him. That's why people love him and adore him. And that's why people hate him. But he didn't need anything from them because he already had everything. And when you can't buy someone off in politics, they're a real problem for you. And he's definitely an outsider. He continues to be one.
Do you think the social media platforms are part of the problem?
Yes, of course. I mean, the public-private partnership between government and the social media platforms, and big tech in general is scary. It's dystopian. It shouldn't be. They use these platforms to circumvent the Constitution and the protections of the First Amendment, and to just outright election interference, the suppression of one side, and the elevation of another side, so on and so forth. I mean, it was gross. It was disgusting what they did in 2020. And, I hope that, that where X and Twitter is going, that it appears that Elon's going to be different, but we'll see as time goes on. The new Twitter is certainly better than the old Twitter, but I'm troubled by it all because it circumvents the protections in the free marketplace of ideas that any free thinking and red-blooded American citizen or citizen of your country as well can stand up and say something and say, I object to this. I think this is great. I think this sucks. I think you're great. I think you suck. That's your right as a free person to say these things and not be punished for it. And they're punishing people, by debanking, defunding, cancellation, the whole 9 yards. And what the hell did anybody fight and ever go to war for if this was going to be the end result? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, Elon brought Tate back, didn't he, and Trump back. We're going to get to Tate as one of your big cases, but before that, which other high-profile cases have you done?
So the most recent one, I have a bunch, but so in terms of January 6th, I represented Richard Barnett. He was the guy who had his feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk on January 6th. So it was like that big picture all over the place. And he was facing 47 years, something like that. He's 62 now. We had trial. Trial lasted 2.5 weeks in D.C. And It was a hell of a fight, and we put up a good fight. We DC is comprised. DC is 96.9% Joe Biden voters, right? And DC is comprised of two groups of people. I'm just going to stereotype the whole place very quickly, right? You have one group of people who are homegrown DC folks, and those are mainly African Americans. You have another group of people who have they're sort of transplants from all over the country, and they're white, affluent, like radical lefties that are just like way out in left field, just all the way out there. Like their politics is their religion. And, if you're not subscribing to the religion, it's, turn or burn. You're either with us or off to the gulag you go. So we had to make a decision in jury selection. Who do we go with here? Do we try to disqualify one side or the other side? Because they all like Biden. Who's going to be more reasonable? We picked a heavy minority jury. Most of our jurors were African American, and we did that for the specific purpose of saying this group of people understands what it's like to be have a unfair experience with the justice system, to be victims of police brutality. 3 out of every 5 black men in America go to jail at some point, guilt or innocence aside, so on and so forth. We had to make a judgment call and say this community is going to be more understanding, we hope, of why somebody could go to a protest and things go crazy, as opposed to this other group who politics is religion for. We had hoped that was going to make a difference. The trial was 2.5 weeks. They deliberated for 2 hours and they convicted him on all charges. In other words, he had no chance in hell. He, even during my summation, some of the jurors were crying. They understood where we were coming from, but they had made their decision before we ever even walked in the room, because of who he was, because of the picture, because he was tried in the media first. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you view it, I still think it's unfair. He got 4 years and change. He's been sentenced to. He recently went in, but it's not 50 years, right? What he was facing. So we had hoped to had been able to do better. We had hoped that the jury and the people would have been more reasonable, but they simply weren't, and that's unfortunate. And the next big January 6th case I have is the case of Ryan Nichols, and that's a decorated United States Marine Corps veteran living with PTSD. He was locked in the gulag for 2.5 years, driven to suicide watch, in solitary confinement for 11 months. He's the best of what America has to offer. He runs his own business. He has 2 kids. He's been married for 10 years. He specializes in search and rescue. He's rescued thousands of people from natural disasters, the best of the best of the best. And they want like 15 years on a plea deal. And if we blow trial, he's facing like I don't know, a lot, 50-something years if we blow trial. Because he went there and made a few speeches. He went into the Capitol. He did something stupid, but he saw an abject level of violence. He saw like women getting beaten up. A woman Roseanne Boylan, she got stomped to death. She got killed. He had recently heard that Ashley Babbitt was shot. He didn't know what the hell was going on. Are we at war? Are we at peace? Is a revolution happening? A lot of things running through his mind. We've tried to reason with the prosecution to see if they would be willing to make us an offer of some kind. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. We're going to waive a jury in that case. We're not putting it before a jury. We're going to go before the judge and have the judge be the finder of fact and law, and hope that we can present and humanize Ryan to the extent where the judge will see that January 6th is an aberration in his life. It is the exception and not the rule. And if we go down, we'll go down swinging, and hopefully it'll be meaningful enough that, if it gets to sentencing, what he's endured already, what he's done for his country, the treatment that he received in jail, and the good things that he's done since that day will count for something. But, I would like to say the jury's out on that, but I don't trust the jury anymore. So we'll just have to get there and see what happens.
That's obscene. You'd think we were in Stalinist Russia by the sounds of the way things are going there.
We are there. We're not very far. We're a step or two away.
All right. Before we go into Tate, then I've got to give the usual disclaimer, because he's so divisive. We have many people who follow the channel who love Tate, especially the young men, and we've got many people who are upset by him. So I've had people on, who have supported him, such as Ryan Dawson. I've got friends such as True Geordie who got into a big internet spat with Tate, and I'd love to see True Geordie and Tate do an interview. I saw Tate recently say he's got no beef with True Geordie anymore. So it'll be good for those guys to make up, because podcast wars, they get views in the beginning, but they can cause a lot of harm in the long run. And then one of my close collaborators, Michael Francis, he's a huge... Thanks for watching our podcast. Here's a word from our sponsor, Shopify. I feel like I'm missing out because everyone is starting a side hustle or their own business these days. And you know what they're hearing a lot? That's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're selling books or events like us, Shopify simplifies selling online and in person so you can successfully grow your business. Shopify covers all your sales channels, from a shopfront-ready POS system to its all-in-one e-commerce platform. Shopify even gets you selling across social media marketplaces like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Full of the industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth, Shopify gives you complete control over your business and your brand without learning new skills in design or coding. And thanks to 24/7 help and with an extensive business course library, Shopify is ready to support your success every step of the way. Look, there's so many options out there to expand your business these days. And what's lovely about Shopify is that no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify will be there to empower you with the confidence and control to take your business to the next level. It's time to get serious about selling and get Shopify today. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/Sean, SHAUN, all lowercase. Go to shopify.co.uk/Sean to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.co.uk/Sean. That's the word from our sponsor. Thanks for watching. Link in description. Back to the podcast. Supporter of Tate. He's done a lot of videos there. So I am just the interviewer. Don't shoot the interviewer when we talk about Tate. And I've said from day one that I believe that Andrew Tate, because he was flexing in a country where in the legal system incomes are so low, I believe he's being liquidated. Because I don't know if you know my backstory, Joe, but I did 6 years in Arizona and I had operations bringing ecstasy in, including through Mexico. If I'd have gone down to Mexico driving around in Bugattis, I would be they would have found a charge and I'd be in a very similar situation. So you're a meal ticket, basically, if you've got that much money. When my co-defendants or any of my associates got arrested in Mexico, we knew we just go down to the cop shop, pay so much money, and they get out. I've interviewed William Rodriguez, the son of the boss of the Cali cartel. When the Cali cartel guys got arrested in Spain, they were facing extradition to America, where they were going to do life. But they paid off the Spanish judges, and they engineered this bull smuggling charge so that they got sent back to Colombia where they could pay their way out. So my other theory is that if Andrew Tate's got some money that the Romanians haven't taken yet, he might want to spread the love around a bit to see if he can lubricate justice over there. But anyway, how did you get into this case in the first place?
So, in addition to doing the January 6th defendant work, I've helped a few people in Trump world, publicly and privately, and members in the American government who were targeted by the January 6th committee and received various subpoenas. I've been on all the shows, Tucker Carlson, here, there, all the big shows. I was really the only outspoken attorney for the first year and a half of this stuff happening, and people were going, well, what the hell are you doing? we don't use the media this way. And I told him, you have to be crazy not to use the media this way. This is a gift. And by the way, the enemy is using it. So you have to fight back. You fight fire with fire, and you do it with fire and intelligence. So I was able to raise my profile that way, and that comes with its positives and its negatives. But one of the positives is that people take notice, and some people say, you know what? I really like the way that guy, he sticks up for people and the way he talks. Other people go, I don't like the way that guy talks at all. I don't like his bald head or his accent or any of that stuff, right? But whatever. So the Tates, they saw me. Some people in their camp saw me, and they say, hey, I think that this guy could do a good job on a multitude of fronts. So let's bring him in and let's talk and let's see if there's a good fit. And right off the jump, we were like long lost brothers, and we have a lot in common. We have our disagreements and our differences, but they are far less than what we share in common. We share a ton of things in common, and I don't like the way that they've been targeted. I don't like the way that they've been treated. I don't agree with everything that they say, but I think that they have a right to say it, and that people shouldn't be incarcerated because they make you feel a certain way. If Andrew Tate says something or Tristan Tate says something that you disagree with, to the extent that it upsets you, you should be upset and process that information in a healthy way. And if they provoke you to the point where you want to counter what they're saying, well, then go out there and say something. Start a podcast, tweet a tweet, write a book, send a letter, do something about it constructively. Don't take away somebody's right to live. Don't take away somebody's right to self-determine their own destiny in this world simply because you don't agree with them. That is the easy way out. That is a fear-based response. It gives life to all types of dystopian nightmares. And, people who by and large have fear of an opposing viewpoint, they're feeding this Leviathan. And, if you think Andrew Tate is the problem, wait until you're dealing with a government that looks at you as a number and not that you're a person with any human rights anymore. So, I respect and I understand why people disagree with the Tates. I do. I get it. Look, they say some divisive stuff, but we live in a divisive world, right? We don't live in a world of 40 years ago or 20 years ago. If I would have told you 20 years ago that we were having conversations about normalizing changing children's genders at 6 years old and putting people on puberty blockers when they were 7, you would tell me I'm some kind of maniac from the future, right? That I've ascended from the pit of hell someplace. But these are the conversations that we're having today. So if a group of people and whoever their leader is gets to say that, there's a legitimate place for minor attracted persons in the world. There's a legitimate place for child sex changes. There's a legitimate places for all these things. There's another group of people that say, okay, we agree. And there's another group of people that say, well, what the hell are you talking about? We disagree, right? But we're not saying that because you're saying these things, you should be put in jail. If you cross the line, fine, we'll have that conversation, but you have a right to say those things. I would rather hear you say them in the public square than for you not to have that right. And in Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate, the manosphere, the alpha male sort of world, they represent a correction in the free marketplace of ideas, in the stock market of ideas, against people who have been short selling traditional masculinity for the past 30 years, against people who have been attacking men for being men for the past 25 years. At some point, the market is going to correct, and they represent a correction in that market. So things can either balance out or the market will crash and nobody will have a voice. It's my hope that things balance out.
Yeah, I agree with you about freedom of speech there. So when you're looking at a case in a foreign country, what are the idiosyncrasies of the Romanian justice system? Because my experience was in America, so I'm familiar with plea bargains. Most cases go to plea bargains. Some people exercise their right to have a trial, jury trial. Is it different in Romania?
Oh, it's much different. So, there are several teams. You have a team in place in Romania, you have a team in place in the States, you have a team in place in the UK, and and other undisclosed locations.
Mm-hmm.
And each team functions as a local council. So in Romania, it is the Romanian legal team that's running point on all these issues. We consult, we work very, very closely together. We advise each other on law, on skills. How does this affect this? How does this affect that? What's the relationship between the States and the UK, and what's going on over here? But when you compare the UK system and the American system, very close, right? With the Romanian system, very, very different. And for instance, one of the things about the Romanian court is perjury is not treated as seriously as it is in the States or in the United Kingdom. Whereas if you lie under oath in the United States, it's your ass. You're going to be in trouble, right? Especially if you get caught, if you catch a perjury charge. It's not as consequential or in Romania. However, one of the things that happens in the American justice system all the friggin' time is that people will levy false allegations and make false reports against each other. This person did this against me. This person did that against me. We treat that with happens all the time in a grain of salt. If you lie in a sworn statement in Romania, if you falsely accuse somebody, it's actually more consequential in Romania than perjury is over here. So it's like this weird shift. Due process, the ability to hold somebody in jail without being charged for 6-8 months over there, very different than what we know. But you learn as you go. You learn the politics, you learn the people, and you learn how media affects the case, how things are different, and we put our heads together, we think our way through things, and we always take what is the most commonsensical and reasonable course of action in every situation with deference to the court that we're in front of. So when it's a Romanian issue, we play by the Romanian rules. We do things the Romanian way to the best extent possible because there's no other way to do it.
So you're saying that the prosecutors can perjure with no consequence, and is that the equivalent of the US having immunity, absolute immunity?
Kind of. I mean, prosecutors have great discretion in Romania, and it's kind of like they're not going to get jammed up for it. That's for sure.
Okay, so when you were looking at the charges initially, then how long has the opposition to produce evidence to back the charges up?
Normally they would produce charges right away. I think the maximum time that they had in Romania was about 6 months before they had to make a call whether they could release the brothers or not. There are technicalities. You can supersede. You can bring new charges. At the end of the day, we know that if the case was strong enough in Romania, those charges would have been right up front, right in the beginning. You would have known right from Jump Street, here are the irreversible, irrefutable allegations that are unimpeachable. They're unassailable. And because of these allegations and these facts, we're gonna say this is the justification for the pretrial incarceration because the case is that strong against them. Well, what you have is the inverse of that. We have a weak case that resulted in the brothers coming out, and which is telling in the court in Romania is not going to say this, and I'm going to be respectful of that court, but on a common sense level, we all understand that means that there is serious problems with the case. The prosecutors don't take a step back if there's an opportunity to take a step forward, and this is a significant step backwards for them, which is an indication of progress in the Romanian case. By and large, what we believe, there's a relationship between the Romanian case and what we're doing in the United States. And in the United States, where we have the defamation suit, the tortious interference suit, we have a bunch of claims against several of Andrew's accusers, and Tristan's accusers, for a conspiracy against them. And we were able to, and we have been able to show the American public and the American judicial system to present them the truthful facts about the very nefarious, illogical, and untrue allegations against the brothers in Romania. And we were able to show a long history of nefarious conduct by the most crucial witnesses against them in the Romanian case. And we believe that the court and the system over there took notice of what we're doing in the States, because in the States, we're going to blow the case wide open. We're going to shine the light of truth into the darkness. We're going to factually exonerate them before the world. There's no chance in hell that Romanian case could ever legitimately breathe a second of life after we get the facts out into the public about what really happened in the United States.
So like I said earlier then, I believe the conspiracy against them is motivated by financial gain. They get to liquidate him. What do you believe the conspiracy that you've uncovered is motivated by?
That's a good question. I think that your theory, there's some credence there for sure. I believe in my gut, in the deepest part of my gut, in my soul, that this is an effort to silence them. That the Tate brothers, in particular, both Andrew and Tristan in their own ways, their message of empowerment, whether you agree or disagree, it has motivated legions, thousands, millions of young males in this world to get off of their asses, to put their electronic devices down, and to do something more meaningful with their life. And by doing so, they resist the programming, what Andrew likes to call the slave programming, right? And when you have, when you're able to deprogram or to take people out of this sort of this wheel where they're just being weakened and weakened and weakened and weakened, and you're strengthening this group of males, you stand against the narrative, the programming narrative. You stand against what the corporate globalist agenda is for males between a certain age. That's not a conspiracy theory. When you look at males, and when you look at males who they were 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, there's a steady progression toward neutering and weakening and feminizing them to the point where they're not recognizable from my father's generation, right? And to be able to turn that around with a series of tweets, to be able to turn that around with a series of TikTok videos and posts is a very, very powerful thing, because the word, the spoken word, when spoken by a powerful man into the word, resonating has produced action, and they want to shut that down. So how do you shut them down? You discredit them, you throw them in jail, and you accuse them of sex crimes.
Well, that's very interesting, because I remember when he said that first they destroy your reputation, then they throw you in jail, and then they kill you. If A, B, or C doesn't work, it just progresses. So when I went after some of the biggest names in the world, and I'm not allowed to talk about this on YouTube, but I'll phrase it very carefully. The case of the guy who was found dead in the jail cell in New York. When I went after, we did a lot of coverage on it. We had 60 million views. We were like the tip of the spear at one point. All the leading people, we interviewed survivors, were on the channel. And then what happened with me was I got terminated twice, but the viewers lobbied to get me back. I got hauled into a cop shop, and I got prosecuted because they said one of my guests named a child, and you can't name a child when a child has had these allegations made, that kind of case where adults attracted to kids kind of case. Because I'd published that on my channel, I was hauled into the cop shop in the UK, threatened with prison, and told if I didn't accept a caution and certain conditions, so I am now restricted from talking about certain things. And if people come on my channel and they have been surviving certain things, they have to say that they waived the anonymity before I'm allowed to talk to them. Otherwise, I go to prison. But I guess I'm just lucky that I didn't wake up one day, get in my car, and it blew up.
It's true. And you're taking a personal risk by the work that you do. And I recognize that in you, and I appreciate that, and I honor that. It's unfortunate that this is the kind of thing that you have to deal with for simply covering the truth, and for speaking what you perceive to be the truth about a matter and asking reasonable questions about a very dubious set of circumstances and saying, hey, any 5-year-old with his head screwed on the right way can see that something is off here. And we just want the answers. And because of that, they want to wreck you and they want to ruin your life, right? So this is happening to you, it's happening to them, it's happening to people all over the place. And the problem is, people always think it's never going to happen to me. It's never going to happen to me. Or it happens to this guy, it happens to that guy. But now it's happening to all of us. At some point, people have to resist. At some point, people have to agree. At some point, people have to wake up and have to take charge of who they give their money to, where they send their subscriptions, and who they vote into office. Every little thing, every penny that you spend in this world matters. And if you just continue to live life like none of this matters, it's only going to be a matter of time before they show up at your door. And by then, it may be too late. It's a sad and very scary thing.
As George Orwell predicted. So my next question then is about legal discovery. In my case, I had over 100 co-defendants. So there was a warehouse full of... My lawyer said basically the paperwork could fill a warehouse. So he brought a laptop to the legal visitation room, and I was allowed day after day for hours and hours without him there just to go over it and look at all the evidence and, you know, run some calculations on the alleged transactions. Have you been given all the evidence in Andrew Tate's case? And what have you ascertained from looking at it, if you have been given the evidence?
Sure. So I had to be careful about this question, right? Because there are two cases. There's the case in Romania, which is the criminal case against him. And we are working very closely with the Romanian team to examine the evidence in that case in the way that's protected reciprocally by attorney-client privilege in both countries. And when you look at the evidence in the Romanian case against them, if you look at it, it's scant. It is contradictory. It relies on dubious, uncredible witnesses, and it conflates recent conduct with tweets and statements that were made a decade ago that are not relevant to anything that they're actually being prosecuted with today. Now, we also have the American case. And in the American case, where Andrew and Tristan are plaintiffs, and they are accusing a woman and a group of other people along with that woman of falsely accusing them and conspiring against them to defame them and to take them down, which has resulted in them losing millions of dollars and months of incarceration needlessly. And in that case, we were able to independently investigate, subpoena, interview witnesses, and acquire information that not only gives them an independent claim or multitude of claims against their wrongdoers in the States, it also exonerates them in part or fully exonerates them in Romania. And what I mean by that is, at the crux of the Romanian case, you have this accuser, and she was in Romania for 6 days. And over the course of 6 days, she went from showing up happy to, quote unquote, being human trafficked. But when we dug into the case, and when we interviewed witnesses, and when we were given documents, and when we subpoenaed companies, and we were able to look at text messages and WhatsApp chats and all these things, you see somebody who, over the course of that 6 days, grabbed another girl, put an invention in her head that things were really bad over there, and said, we're going to get Academy Awards, we're going to get Oscars, a golden statue for our part in this here, and we're essentially going to falsely accuse them, and then we're going to fly the coop. That's all in writing, right? The Romanian system has had that forever. That in and of itself should have been enough to justify their immediate release in the beginning of this case and the absolute throwing away of this case. But for reasons that we can all pontificate about or speculate about, that didn't happen. But in addition to that information, we were able to determine that this woman has a long history of targeting affluent men, wealthy men, successful men in the United States, in particular in Florida. And then after she is with them for a period of time, she begins the process of blackmailing them and extorting them. And a part of her modus operandi is to weaponize the justice system against her victim at the time in order to bring the man to her knees. This is a predator who uses sex as a means to entrap men and then uses the threat of a justice system as a means to blackmail and extort men. And we have had multiple men come to us and say, I am a victim of this woman. This is what she's done to me. This is what she's done to me. One guy actually killed himself, right? There's a body count here of men's lives who's been destroyed by this woman. So when you take that and you add it to what the Romanian case is already about, there's just incontrovertible evidence that this woman can never be trusted. She's never going to be able to sustain cross-examination under oath. Right? She's just not going to be able to do it. So how is it then that the entire Romanian case hinges on this person? It's just illogical. There are political reasons here. There are enemies in high places who want to see these guys jammed up until they can concoct the next bullcrap set of charges against them, whether that's in the UK or somewhere else, in order to jam them up and bleed them dry of every penny that they have, of every part of influence that they have, to cancel them across every platform, to make them go away in perpetuity forever and ever. But if you know anything about those brothers, that's simply never going to happen.
So are the testimonies of those men admissible in the Romanian court?
We certainly believe that they are. And we certainly have been in contact with, I don't want to give away strategy, but the answer is yes. We believe that they are. They should be used. It would be wise for them to be used. It would be devastating to the prosecution's case if used. Again, we just don't see how they can recover from this, which is why if I were sitting in that courtroom, I would dismiss these charges, because there has to be some modicum, some shred of credibility here, and that just doesn't exist.
Do you think the prosecutor's holding on to other exculpatory evidence?
Yes, because they always do. Yeah, especially in this case. Yes.
And do you suspect what the nature of that evidence is?
I don't want to speculate, because I don't want to jam them up, but we have already in this case independently uncovered information that was not provided when it should have been provided, if they weren't, if they didn't have people who loved them, if they didn't have people who were backing them, if they weren't able to, budget accordingly, they wouldn't be able to fight in this meaningful capacity. But because they are who they are, they're able to fight with a fair degree of force and resources. That's saying something. They're making a statement not only for themselves, but for every other man in the world who's ever been falsely accused of this type of thing. It's absolutely ridiculous that a man's life could be destroyed simply because a woman says, you said something inappropriate to me in 1973. You did this, you did that, whatever it is. That's not to take away from the reality of horrible things that men sometimes do. But good men should never have their lives destroyed simply because they've been accused with something. And this case represents, hopefully, an end to that practice once and for all.
So what are the consequences of withholding exculpatory evidence in the Romanian justice system? Could that be grounds to get the case kicked out?
If the case were to proceed to a certain point and exculpatory evidence was not turned over, that would be grounds to get kicked out, as it would be in the United States as well. In the United States, we call it Brady information, right? It's Brady evidence. You have a constitutional right to view any evidence that could possibly reasonably be interpreted as exculpatory, especially if it will affect the outcome of your case. Prosecutors routinely bury and hide this stuff with the hopes that it'll never be discovered. But in the world of, high tech and computers and information, it's become increasingly more difficult for them to do that. And we certainly hope that practice comes to an end, because it's an egregious one.
So if it goes to trial, what is a trial like in Romania? I heard there's no jury and it's a 3-judge panel.
It's very different. Yeah, they'll be in front of a few judges, and it's very different when you have the judges being the finders of truth, the finders of fact and law. But look, it can go either way, right? Because you can get a room of people who hate them, you can get a room of people who love them. The judge is supposed to be able to keep the politics and the love-hate stuff and the emotions out of the courtroom, because they're judges. So it may shape up to actually help them in this case, although they are beloved in Romania. You ask your common Romanian citizen about the Tate brothers, and they absolutely love them. I mean, I asked everybody when I was there, and they are adored, all over the place. But we go back to the January 6th cases. I was talking about Ryan Nicholas's case, which is coming up, the trial in November, and we're waiving the jury in that case because we don't trust the jury. We actually want the judge. So it can go either way, and no jury. It'll be a few judges.
Do you think it's riskier though with the judges because it's so politicized?
It depends on the country that you're in. So far, it appears that there are some international political influences in the prosecutor's office, but we haven't seen them necessarily across the judicial spectrum, right? There seems to be diversity of opinion, and there are some people there appears to be some judges there that credibility still matters to them, and they're not going to be influenced by what somebody in America or someone else thinks about what should happen to the brothers in terms of the outcome of their fate. When you look at if I was accused of a crime right now and I had to go before judges, and I had to choose, do I want to go before judges in Washington D.C. or Budapest? I'm choosing Budapest, right? Because I think I'm going to get a fairer shake in Hungary than I would in the United States right now. That's how I feel. So, I think and I hope that the Romanian system, especially the judges, will lean more towards objectivity and the fair application of law, something that the American justice system is apparently unable to do right now.
Does the Romanian justice system have the equivalent of a plea bargain?
It's a little bit different. I don't. Yes and no. It's a little bit different. I don't want to give the legal answer on this because I don't know it 100%. We have spoken about it, but we have not entertained the thought of a plea bargain in the Romanian situation. And because I'm not a Romanian lawyer, I have had to learn a lot of the idiosyncrasies that we're talking about and the differences. And the ones that I've been learning about are on point. So I don't have a good answer to that question because we just haven't entertained it. It's just something that they're not going to do. So that, when my question came up about that, it was just like, yeah, F that, bro. We're not doing that ever. We're innocent. And we just kept it moving.
What are the range of outcomes from best case scenario to worst case scenario for the guys?
Best case scenario is they walk in Romania. They dismiss this case and they don't even have to go to trial. Next best case scenario is they go to trial and they win. Worst case scenario is they are found guilty and they are incarcerated and financially bled and drained. That everything that they have that hasn't been millions and millions of dollars has been seized from them already. They've had probably about $15 million worth of items taken from them at this point. And I would imagine that if they were convicted, that they would go for the rest of it. And that would be the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario would be the brothers in jail with no voice and no money, stripped of everything simply because of who they are and what they believe in, despite the fact that they're innocent.
Is there a face-saving scenario whereby charges could be reduced, Romania could get a conviction, keep assets, but the guys could get back time, something like that?
Yes, there is. I don't want to speak too much on that, but yeah, there is. And one of the things I can say that the problem is that this is the biggest case in Romanian criminal jurisprudence history in modern era. Like, the Romanian government hasn't spent more money in a prosecution ever. And that's saying something. So the idea that they're going to, exit the situation here with nothing, absent a trial is kind of hard to conceive, right? So how do you reconcile that with two guys who were innocent? Well, we have this woman and this group of people who essentially...
Thank you for watching the podcast. Here's a word from our sponsor, Rocket Money. Don't you hate it when you've got subscriptions out there that you don't know about, taking all that cash out of your account? I recently found out I had 4 Amazon Prime subscriptions. Now I've got it down to 1. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills, all in one place. Most people think they're spending $80 on their subscriptions, when in reality the number is closer to $200. When you're signed up for so many things like streaming services you used to watch one show, or free trials for delivery you don't use, it's so easy to lose track of what you're paying for. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and manage your money the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/Sean, SHAUN. That's rocketmoney.com, SHAUN, rocketmoney.com/Sean. Thanks for supporting our sponsor. Link is in the description box on YouTube. Back to the podcast.
Used the Romanian system as a weapon to capture these men and to silence these men and to hurt these men. So what we're proffering to them, and what we hope they can see at this point, is that they too are actually victims of this woman's misconduct. If they're looking for a conviction, they should go after her. If they're looking for something to hang their hat on, they should go after the bad actors who inappropriately use that system and all this money to try to put away 2 men. That's one scenario. It's a hopeful one, but it's a real one. There are a few others that I don't want to get into because of ongoing processes of thinking and negotiations. But we're hopeful in the end that we'll get a full exoneration, because that's what they deserve.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Unmaking a Murderer about Brendan Dassey and Stephen Avery, looking at the 10 ways prosecutors and detectives frame innocent people. And a common theme is that when they're committed, even when evidence comes to light, they are committed. And there's been incidences of where people on death row, they've left them to get executed rather than this evidence come to light and their careers unwind, and then they have to explain then to the victims' family members they got the wrong guy and all this stuff. So do you think that because they are committed, there's going to have to be some kind of middle ground plea bargaining situation?
I certainly hope not. I mean, the problem with overcommitting and tunnel vision that you're talking about is very real. I think it comes from pride. It comes from a place where if we admit that we're wrong on this, then other people are going to say that we were wrong on that, and the whole system unravels. I get that to some extent, but to be able to put your pride aside and talk about credibility and what does true justice mean, and to say, hey, look, we really thought that you were guilty, but at the end of the day, we're finding out that that guilt actually rests with someone else. It's just not a blame shifting scenario. It is like saying, hey, we are innocent. Why would you ever want to put innocent people in jail? Here are the wrongdoers. So when you look at the other exoneration cases, lots of times the DNA evidence will point to the actual wrongdoer. While person X is being exonerated, person Z is also simultaneously being accused or being found out. We have that situation here. You have a situation where these people, the brothers, the Tates, have been falsely accused, and we have a wrongdoer to which we can point and say, this person is actually, and this group of people are actually guilty of crimes. We hope that that will count for something. I'm not saying that every word that Andrew and Tristan Tate have ever said in their lives is great or awesome or not problematic. Well, what I am saying is that the evidence against them and the words that are against them currently in the body of evidence does not rise to the level of a conviction in this case. And if you were going to impeach me for every bad thing I've ever said in my life, well, maybe you'd have a case against me. God knows what I've said when I was a teenager and 20 and 30 years ago. But who the hell cares? And again, we had to separate who these men were 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago, and look at them for who they are today, because they have grown, they have metamorphosized, they have changed, and they are these tremendous men today, and that really says something. So set aside the past, focused on what is in front of you, the evidence presented, and when you look at that, there's just no way that they can be convicted in a court of law. There's just no way. The evidence is not there.
So are you saying then there's not just a component of them being victims of their own flexing, there's also a component of them being victims of their own words?
Yes. I mean, for God's sakes, during the President Trump years and during the last election, he was banned from Twitter for mean tweets. I mean, this is the world that we live in right now. So if Trump was banned for mean tweets, what's the establishment going to try to do to Andrew Tate for what he says, right? They're criminalizing free speech. They're criminalizing opposition, dissension, opposing points of views, right? Controversial points of views. Let Andrew Tate say what he has to say and give a counterpoint and judge him by the merits, but don't try to take away his freedom for that. Is that what's happening? 100%. That is what's happening right now. He is being penalized for some of the things that he said in the past. But again, those words do not arise to the level of criminal acts.
Let's look at the words he's saying in the present then, because my lawyer, he said to me right away, don't speak to the media. If you pick up the phone in the day room and call your mom, it's recorded. Don't speak to the inmates. They will snitch you out to try and get the sentences reduced. It seems to me that Andrew Tate has done the complete opposite, and he's gone on a rampage doing all these interviews, and that would have been my lawyer's worst nightmare. How do you reconcile that? Because court is theatre. Every month I went to court for 26 months fighting my case. Prosecutor said I was the Antichrist. My lawyer said I was a child protege, stock market guy gone wild. Neither were true. The truth was somewhere in between, but I couldn't say a thing. And the theatre production company that puts on the best theatre show wins. My lawyer got Ray Krohn, the snaggletooth killer, off death row. They gave him $5,000 to represent himself, and they paid an expert witness $50,000 to say a bite matched on the victim's leg with his teeth when they knew it didn't. And they put on the best show and they won. But don't you think Andrew Tate, because these prosecutors are clickbaiters from hell, and they will take tiny little bits of what you're saying in the present and put that in a twisted way to make you sound guilty. So don't you think it's problematic that he's been doing these interviews?
No, I don't think it's problematic. I think you got to fight fire with fire. And when the truth is on your side, if you just rain the truth down just over and over and over and over again, at some point, it has to have some effect. There is a difference between a man who is partially guilty and partially innocent, right? And between him and a man who is innocent, as innocent can be, and says, man, by God, I am innocent. I am not going to sit by here and let these people wrongfully accuse me and be silenced when I have a platform to actually tell the world how I feel. So, did we have these conversations? Sure. But Andrew is brilliant. Tristan is brilliant. I don't think people understand how smart these two guys actually are. I mean, Andrew's like a world champion kickboxer, a world champion chess player. The guy is very, very smart. And so is Tristan. They're well read. They're well thought out. They're calculated. They're thought through. Even their messaging. to the population of people, of men. They saw a need. They saw something, a need, and they stepped in and they filled the void. They stepped into the gap. And did they make money off of it? Sure, they made money off of it. Have they helped people? Sure, they've helped people. Have they pissed a lot of people off along the way? Sure, they pissed a lot of people off along the way. So what? So when you have somebody who's this capable, who's this much of a fighter, who's this intelligent, plus you have the truth on your side, plus you have the ability to bring in somebody like Tucker Carlson from the United States, who's legitimate, who's mainstream, who people respect, who's a fair journalist, who's going to ask questions and give Andrew an ability to say things and then present the full interview, unlike the BBC, to the public, live and uncut, and let the people judge it on its merits. That is an opportunity. That is a set of circumstances that you have to act on. You have to act on that opportunity. You can't put your head down as an attorney or a client on your pillow at night and say, oh man, I let that one go by me. No, you have to grab a hold of that. And we used it. And that Tucker Carlson interview, it just recently got broke by Trump, his interview with Trump, but it got 100 million views in like a week. There was 100 million, millions and millions of my mother and father, my baby boomer mother and father sitting at home in their chairs in Tennessee, looking up at the TV, watching Tucker and Andrew. I'm in the back looking at them going, why does my mom and dad watching Andrew and Tucker talk right now? We put this together, but all these people in the world are watching them, and they're being introduced to Andrew for the first time in the most unbiased way possible. And he's able to explain to the world, this is who I am. This is what I'm talking about. Traditional Western values. A man is a man, as a woman is a woman. And this is what I believe. If you don't agree with me, that's fine, but I'm not going to change my opinion. I'm a principled person, so on and so forth. My dad turned to my mom and he goes, I don't understand what the hell is people's problem with this guy. And when I saw that happen, I knew that we had something. And I knew that we got to keep doing that again and again and again and again, because people have an innate ability to recognize bullshit and to recognize truth. And when Andrew talks, people recognize truth.
Yeah, definitely. I've watched a lot of their stuff, the Valuetainment ones they did recently. And Andrew and Tristan are very eloquent and powerful speakers. And the emotion, when they're protesting their innocence, it definitely resonates. But I've seen situations whereby people, when they have ongoing cases, protest their innocence and are innocent in the face of a corrupt justice system. If they do get convicted of something, then the prosecutor turns around and said, well, during, the case, this person's been shouting his innocence from the rooftops. He is not remorseful, Your Honor, so we need to super aggravate the sentence. And I've seen that happen. Is there a risk of that, or do you think that the risk of that is outweighed by the benefits of what they're doing?
The risk is outweighed by the benefits here. Is the risk there? Sure. But the facts are so strongly on their side that no reasonable person in Andrew's shoes, when looking at the facts, could ever disagree with what he's saying. And look, I encourage you, all your viewers, especially the Tate detractors, if you hate the Tates, fine, hate them all you want, but I will send you the motion. It's available online. Read the motion that we filed in the American court. It's lengthy. It's like 60 pages long. Just get through the statement of facts. If you can get through the statement of facts, and if you can see the progression of what actually happened to them, right, and the evidence that we presented there, with the knowledge that the entire Romanian case hinges on essentially the same fact pattern that started in the United States of America, if you, after reading that and taking that information, then can still conclude that these guys are guilty, then fine, that's your opinion. But I promise you, a substantial amount of your viewers, upon reading this and afterwards, are going to convert. You don't have to become like Andrew Tate supporters, but you're going to understand that he's not guilty of the crimes that he's being charged. And then you're going to have to make a moral judgment within yourself, right? Do I want this person to go to jail simply because I don't agree with what he's saying? Or am I astute enough, objective enough, reasonable enough to say, you know what? I think what he says sucks, but I don't want him to go to jail for it. That's all we're asking for here. You don't have to love him, but you should respect his right to exist in this world as a free person to the extent that he shouldn't go to jail simply because you disagree with him. And neither should you, neither should anybody. And that's all we're asking for here, reasonableness.
So I'm assuming then they're going to use what he said about the lover boy method as evidence against him. How do you counter that?
Well, look, again, it has to fit into the context of what the time frame that under which he's been charged, right? There's a time frame, 2021-ish, going forward, right, and then going backwards. Anything that's beyond the time frame is not relevant. If there's something that's in the time frame, then we have to examine it and make sure that it's, number one, in its proper context. Number two, it actually came from him.
Here is a word from today's sponsor, Aura. If you Google someone, you can find out all kinds of personal information about them. This information is accessible because of data brokers who profit by selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers. You can use my link, https://aura.com. Aura is AURA / Sean Attwood, SHAUNATT Wood, to try 2 weeks for free and see how many data brokers are sharing your info. Also linked in my description box on this YouTube version, or scan the QR code on the screen.
Aura also monitors your emails and passwords to see if they were involved in a data breach and exposed on the dark web, and gives you the recommendations on what to do.
Aura has almost every internet safety tool you'll ever need, all inside one app.
And number three, did he actually act on it, right? And the answer is going to be he didn't act on any of that stuff. Does Andrew Tate say wild stuff? Has Andrew Tate said wild stuff? Hell yeah. You know what? So have I, and so have half of the people I know, half the guys I know in this world. It's just you say things sometimes, right? Does that mean that it's criminal? No. If you were to look at the chat conversations between the CEOs of Target or McDonald's or Chase Bank or Citibank or whoever they are, and they were talking about maximizing profits and cutting down on manpower and making people work more in this sector and shaving from here and over there, you'd be like, these people are talking about corporate slavery. They should all go to jail. But because they're talking about it, it's okay. But if you see it in any other context, or especially if it's coming out of Andrew Tate's mouth, all of a sudden it's criminal. People have to realize that this kind of stuff, this kind of talk happens every day. And if it doesn't arise to the level of criminality, you shouldn't go to jail for it. You can say it's morally reprehensible. You can say, I don't agree with it. What the hell is he talking about? This is outrageous. Agree, disagree, all you want. Start a podcast, go on the show, write a book, do whatever you want. But the idea that somebody should go to jail for saying some things or some wild stuff is still not good enough. It's not acceptable in a free and open society to incarcerate somebody because they say something that you simply disagree with.
So what is the legal status now? Are they in limbo? There's no scheduled trial or hearings imminent?
In Romania, there's a tentative trial date, I believe in October, around October 8th, something like that. I probably think that's going to move based on what's been going on. The rest of it seems to be in limbo. This is my fear, right? My fear is this. My fear is that we beat the case in Romania because the case is beatable. But they use it as a dry run to see how they're going to be defended, to see who's going to come to their defense. And then they come up with a case in the UK, or they come up with a case someplace else, and they stack all these accusers against them, and they do all this stuff in order to prosecute them again, right? In the United States, in England, you got the concept of double jeopardy. You can't be charged for the same thing twice. But in this globalist sort of world that we live in this interconnected world that we live in, you could conceivably get charged and tried for the same thing in 3 different countries until somebody checkmates you on the chessboard. And I really believe that that's what we're up against. I think we win in Romania. I think we win in the United States. I think someplace, somewhere else, some disgruntled group of people in government someplace go after them again and until they can get their pound of flesh. I hope that doesn't happen. I do not want that to happen because these guys are innocent, but because of what they're saying is so politically charged and empowering to the men, that the young boys that they're trying to capture, I really believe that that can and may indeed happen.
So, is the judge that changed the location of detention to house arrest and then off house arrest, would that judge be on the panel if there was a trial?
I don't believe so. It's a good question. I'm a little still fuzzy on the way that works, but the way I see things so far, basically in Romania, once a judge touches it at one level, they don't touch it again at the next level. So I believe it would have to be, in other words, if there are a pool of judges, each judge that touches the case on the way up would subsequently be disqualified from touching it at the next level. I could be wrong at that. I'm not an expert in Romanian jurisprudence, but my understanding of the situation is that the judge would be different.
So in some cases like this, they snatch everyone up and rely on people going over to the other side, snitching, cooperating. Have they been leaning on the females in this case?
Oh, man, that's a great question. They have leaned on females in this case, other than Emma and the other girl that she conspired with. All the other girls have said there's no problems with these guys. A few of the girls in particular have said, not only is there no problem with these guys, we love them, we adore them. They've made videos, they've gone online and said, hey, but the government has said over there, at least in the beginning, oh, no, I'm sorry, sweetheart. You've been brainwashed, or you've been lover boyed, or you've been, somehow hoodwinked. And, we know better. This is really not how you feel. So we're not going to accept your statements that nothing happened. We're going to take this very paternalistic approach and say, we know what's really happened. And, we're going to count you as victims anyway. And these girls will go, what the hell? We're not victims. I mean, how much more demeaning can you be to a female, to a woman, to say, I'm sorry, sweetheart, you don't have the ability to think for yourself. This man has so much power over you that you must not know what's going on. These are educated women. One of them has a degree in psychology. She actually uses it and say, I have a degree in psychology. There's no problem with Andrew or Tristan. These are great men. Everybody who works here is happy, and there was no problem until this other woman showed up. Like, it's obvious about what's going on here. So they leaned on him, but they didn't get the result they wanted.
So the female co-defendants have been offered deals.
No, these are the female co-defendants are different. I'm talking about female witnesses, right?
Yeah, that's my next question. Have they been offered deals, the female co-defendants?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
Because aren't they usually relying on the domino theory that, if they can get the other Codys to roll over? Because I heard Tristan say they'd offered something to him. I think it was on the Valuetainment interview.
Yeah, the thing is that when you're innocent, and everybody knows that you're innocent, people aren't necessarily inclined, unless you're innocent. Guys take deals all the time. So I should clarify what I'm saying, right? But when you have such a strong chance of winning, it's just like, are we even going to, sure, they made me an offer. Am I going to take it? No, we're going to go in there. We're going to beat you. Most prosecutors are used to people just rolling over and taking pleas. They're not used to somebody actually going in there and actually fighting and saying, hey, I didn't do anything wrong here, and I have the ability and the resources to prove it. So this is different in many respects, especially regarding the fact that, they didn't have. It's not like this is like a kingpin drug operation where they got a guy selling on the ground who's going to get the guy at the top, right? This is not one of those situations. Nobody got picked up with bundles of anything. Everybody's innocent here. Everybody's got the same story. There's no need to lie. There's no story to change. The story has been consistent across the board because it's the truth. And how they convict in light of that is beyond me.
So what are the spirits of the guys like now? Because I know when Andrew got off house arrest, he had that look I'm familiar with, the shock of the newly incarcerated. Has he bounced back from that?
Yeah, Andrew has he's a strong guy, and over these past months, he's become He's deepened in his faith, his devotion to God. He has become more introspective. He's thought a lot about some of the things that he said in the past, and looked to distance himself to some extent. He says, look, I don't make apologies about what I said 10 years ago. That's who I was 10 years ago, but it's not who I am anymore. Like, I'm not going to say all of those things. Some of the things I said hold true, like men have a right to self-determine. Men are great. Men are crucial. Men are responsible for a lot of the good things in this world. I'm never going to detract on that. But maybe some of my other comments, they were a little bit unsavory at the time, but I was a little bit more grizzled and closer to the street than I am now. I had 100 followers or 1,000 followers back then. Now I have several million. I conduct myself differently, right? So I admire his tenacity. I admire his strength and his will to persevere, as I do Tristan's. I've had multiple conversations with Tristan as well. Him and I share a common faith, right? We're both Christians, and we talk about that a lot, and we've prayed together, and we've talked about the future. These guys also do a tremendous amount of charity work. People don't realize how much money they've given to charity. They have fed entire villages, war-torn countries, orphanages, people, education. They're always giving. They're always giving because they come from nothing, and they have not forgotten where they come from. They understand what it's like to live in this world in very hard, difficult circumstances and not have the financial resources that you need to do whatever it is. They are always giving. I mean, I cannot oversell that enough. It's the truth. They're very generous with whatever they have, and they're very helpful to lots of people. And they do not broadcast it. They just do it. If anybody ever actually digs into their charitable efforts, they're going to be shocked at the level of contribution and philanthropy that they've done throughout the world. Because I had no clue until I was introduced to it. And I spoke to some of the people around him, and I began to ask questions. And I said, why the hell you didn't tell me this? I'd want to know. Well, I just don't talk about it, bro. And well, tell me. I want to know. And when I learned, I was like, oh my God, you guys have done a tremendous amount of good. The world needs to know about this. And I'm going to help you get that truth out there.
So there's no worse psychological torture than not knowing what's going to happen to you in your future. I was in Sheriff Joe's jail, and the conditions, the gangs, the cockroaches, the dead rats in the food didn't matter. I was facing 200 years, and when I got 9.5, it was the happiest day of my life because I could see when I was going to get out. So are they still in that mindset, where the uncertainty's gnawing away at them? I think that's a huge thing for the unsentenced prisoner. And are they looking at this situation as a way of maturing? Trials and tribulations make us stronger, and we grow. Are they able to take that anxious energy and change it to their advantage?
It's a great question. And they have, living with this level of uncertainty is gut-wrenching. It is, especially for two men who are alpha male, absolutely in control of their destiny, wielding incredible power and force in their personal lives and globally across the world. These guys are they're in control. And when you have that control taken away from you, and you have the possibility of your freedom being taken away as well, and you don't have the absolute authority, it's not like, okay, Andrew or Tristan, your fate is going to be determined by your next fight. Go in there and train your butts off, and then go in there and fight to the death. They would prefer that than their fate being in my hands and in the hands of other people, right? But it's not. Their fate is to some degree in my hands and in other lawyers' hands, and in the prosecution's hands and the respective judges' hands. And at some point, you have to learn how to detach from that, so you can exist in your day-to-day life with some normal degree of humanity and living. So did they have to did they have to acquire a new set of skills in order to find happiness and peace and all the things that they had in their normal life before these things happened? Did they have to relearn how to do that now and how to apply it? Yes. Did that cause them to expand instead of contract as people? Yes. Do they have this new level of character and this new level of understanding and all these things? Yes, they do. But it's grueling. It's unforgiving. It's not easy. But again, I admire their steadfastness. I admire their consistency. They're mentally tough. They're spiritually strong. They're devoted to winning. They're devoted to God. They're devoted to truth. And when your approach is fundamentalist with regard to those things in situations like this, it'll give you an incredible amount of strength. And it's what I had to do in order to succeed. And I certainly recognize it in them.
Is there anything I've left out here, Joe? This has been fascinating to get into the nitty gritty.
Left out, I think that one of the things that we can just maybe to close out on, to touch on again, is to say to the people out there, especially the Tate detractors, look, I get why you may not like some of the things that they say, especially in the world that we live in today. But at the end of the day, we all have a right to self-determine our own destiny. We have a right to free speech and to say things that other people disagree with. It's okay for you to be upset. It's okay for you to disagree, but it's not okay for you to just blanketly sign on to somebody's incarceration because you don't like what they're saying. It's an evil. It's a greater evil than anything that can possibly be perceived to come out of any of these guys' mouths. For you to sign on to say, you know what, because I disagree and loathe them so much that I'd rather see them silenced and put in jail forever than have to endure another tweet by Andrew Tate or Tristan Tate. That's madness. You can't do that. You can't sign on to that kind of thing. So I would encourage people to read my motion and to make an objective determination on the facts. And to say, if this case in Romania truly hinges on this girl and her co-conspirators' allegations, then there's just no way that it can be true. I guarantee you, if you're a reasonable person and you read this motion, you're not going to be able to conclude that Andrew and Tristan Tate are guilty. And if they're not guilty, then they deserve to go free. And if they deserve to go free, then let them go free. And that's really what I have to say about it, Sean.
Well, after speaking to you, it sounds like they've been railroaded. It's definitely a super weak case. I'm inundated with young men who say they've been inspired by them. And we were the first prison channel. We started in 2007. They're all urging me to try and get Andrew's Romanian prison stories. I'd love to go out there and speak to him. But yeah, wish you all the best, man. You're on such a fantastic mission. It's great what you're doing, your passion, coming from what happened to your brother. I'm sure that opened many people's hearts here. And if they are against Andrew Tate, I think you might have changed some people's minds. So for people watching this then, how can those people support you and follow you on socials, etc.?
So I am at McBride Law NYC. It's MCBRIDE Law NYC across all social media platforms. If somebody is inclined to give to the January 6th work that I'm doing, or our firm's global mission for the fight to protect the freedom of speech in the United States of America and abroad across the world, they can go to my webpage. It's McBrideLawNYC.com. There's a transition page there right now, but they can find all the relevant information. If you're inclined to support Andrew and Tristan Tate in our fight for their freedom and their fight for the preservation of their reputations, I encourage you to look them up online, to contribute to their fund as well. You can find it on their website, and to speak out. Speak out. If you disagree about what's going on, speak out in the public workplace, speak out on social media. Don't be afraid to be criticized. Don't be afraid to lose friends. If somebody wants to cut you off because you like Andrew Tate or you support whatever candidate is in office, they were never your friends to begin with. And if you have an opportunity to foster meaningful dialogue at home with your family members or your friends over these discussions, then do it. Again, That's what this is about. This is about freedom of thought. This is about the free exchange of ideas. And, you know, reasonable people can disagree all the time without wanting to put the other person in jail. We're free thinking Westerners. We're not Bolsheviks. So I would encourage you to remember that.
And that's when we will learn the most, when we hear from people we don't agree with. If we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, we're never going to learn anything. So don't shoot the interviewer. Remember, in the comments, please. All of Joe's links will be in the description box below this video if you're watching it on YouTube. So please go down and support his important work. And I can't wait to see all the comments on this one. It usually goes crazy when it's anything to do with Tate. But most importantly, Joe, huge thank you for spending so much time with us today, and we salute your work and all the best with what you're doing, my friend.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you, Sean, and salute back to you for the work that you're doing as well. God bless.
Cheers from London.